Welcome to the Black Doctors Talk podcast. I am Dr. Christopher Holmes, your host for this episode and member of the Black Doctoral Network. Today, I am joined by Dr. Shaun Anderson, who is a professor, author, and consultant in the areas of communication and corporate social responsibility efforts. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Shaun Anderson. Good afternoon, sir. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I'm excited to have you here. I am looking forward to this interview and have you share with our listeners and our viewers. So first, I would like for you to start by telling our viewers and listeners a little bit about your background. Where did it all begin for you?
Oh man, if you've heard of Little Rock, Arkansas, a lot of people say they've heard of that, but not Pine Bluff. And so Pine Bluff, Arkansas is actually about 30 minutes south of Little Rock. It all began there. I was born and raised. I lived with my grandparents, actually. It was this old shotgun house. My grandparents, my mother, and my two sisters, and I. So we all grew up in this house. Great times there. Pine Bluff is actually a very, primarily Black people there. It has a well-known HBCU, the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, and it was very much known for its agriculture, making the city at the time when the university was built one of the richest in the country at some point. And so along with being in the South, sports was king, right? Nice. So for me, it's like I either played football with my homies or I was left out. Right. So grew up playing football, all types of sports, had all of the hopes of becoming an NFL player, all of that. But I had a knee injury that derailed all of that. But I still had an interest in sport, but not just playing it. I had a mentality too of, hey, why can't I own a team instead of just, playing? And so I took that concept. I went to the Yard, as we called it, UAPB, for my undergrad. And there I majored in communication. I was also the sports reporter for the school newspaper. After I graduated from there, in 2005, dating myself a little bit, but
that's okay.
But I went to work for a local television station there in sports production. Mm-hmm. And so, I worked there for a couple of years and felt like I wanted more. I wanted to gain a more sort of like societal understanding of sports. So I went to pursue my master's degree at Arkansas State University. And then I went to go work. I was all over. I went to Texas for a little bit and worked in communication consulting. And then the big recession hit.
Yeah.
So I went through a whole thing of losing my job, living in the streets for a little bit, and ultimately having to come back home to live with my mom. And so for that year, I was just trying to figure out things like what to do, what's going to happen, because I never had the idea of actually going to pursue a PhD. But excuse me, I actually ended up talking to one of my old professors at Arkansas State, who was like, "Hey, you have a gift of education. You like understanding society and communication and all of that, and you like sport. Why don't you pursue it?" And initially I was hesitant. And then I was like, well, I ain't got nothing else to lose. At my mom's house, I got to do better. So, and this is the tripped out part. I was able to work a couple of little odd jobs, and I saved up for the PhD application, the admissions application and stuff like that. And so I heard back from a few schools, and at the time, some were not willing to offer full scholarships or full tuition assistantships, except for one, and that was West Virginia University. And so I was like, all right, I'm out of here. I got to do something better with myself. And so, no lie, when it was time to go to that school, I had only enough money for a Greyhound bus ticket I had a duffel bag full of clothes.
Wow.
And I got on this bus and traveled 2 days from Little Rock, Arkansas, to where my mom was living currently, to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then from there, there was like a local bus that took you from Pittsburgh to West Virginia, because it's about an hour's drive. And when I initially got there, I got my keys to my apartment, and I was like, what is this place? It is this old broken down apartment. I'm like, what did I get myself into? And so the first semester there was pretty intense. It was a very intense program. They expected you to know a lot about research. And for me, it had been 5 years or so since I got that master's degree. So I had to kind of catch up where everybody else in my cohort was kind of, on. And so I was considering letting it go, because I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And my old professor, who convinced me to go get a PhD in the first place, was like, stick it out. You can do this. And once you graduate, you can go and do what you want. And so I did that. And actually, after that semester, things began to flourish. And so I got really good at the research, and it got good to the point to where I was helping professional sport teams with a lot of their diversity and inclusion initiatives.
Wow, in the program.
In the program. And
wow.
I was taking graduate level courses in the program. And so at that point, there were a few positions out, and I saw this one in Los Angeles. And I actually met my wife in the PhD program, and she was from Los Angeles.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, right. And so she was like, you love sports. I want to go home. This is a match, And so I was like, all right, let's do this. And so I've been here in Los Angeles now 4 or 5 years. I'm going to start my 6th year, of course, in the fall. So that's a little bit of where I started and how I got here.
A little Southern boy from Arkansas, now living in the sunny Los Angeles, California.
It took me about 2 years to get used to it, though.
Oh, I can bet.
The first thing was the traffic, but then after that, I was like, okay, I got it. It's cool.
That's awesome. So tell the people a little bit about what you currently do.
Okay, so I am a scholar activist, and actually what works is that my university is all about this sort of teacher-scholar model. So your teaching informs your scholarship and vice versa. And so primarily, of course, I serve as a teacher and a researcher, scholar at Loyola Marymount University. And the university is all about using your work to engage in social justice initiatives.
Oh, wow.
And so for me, a lot of my work, of course, deals with what we understand in the textbook, but I also try to provide students with hands-on approaches to help in some of the world's most complex issues. And I use my understanding of sport as a way to be able to kind of talk about some of those issues, right?
Right.
Because when we hear about sport and social change, we always hear about this concept of sport being like a microcosm of society.
Mm-hmm.
And if we think about sport today and how people like to try to separate sport and politics, well, that's pretty much inevitable, right? Because it's been ingrained in sport for such a long time. And so my work then focuses on how we can look at the sport organization as a whole, right? And those people who are participants in it, such as the athletes, the owners, right? How can we use this platform to engage in social justice initiatives? For example, one assignment that I had my students do was putting together a communication campaign as to how the LA Olympics team could make things better for people in Los Angeles while they are trying to build up the villages for the Olympics in 2028.
Right.
So you're talking about the homeless population, right? What can we do to kind of assuage that issue, while we're pushing them away, trying to build up these villages downtown?
Right.
Or what are you going to do for the environment when much of the traffic comes into certain areas of Los Angeles, and it gets you more pollution?
Mm-hmm.
What can we do to work on those issues? So it's beyond the concept of fandom for me. It's looking at those types of things, the societal aspects.
Oh man, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I need to enroll in the class. I like hands-on, I like relevant approaches to learning, because it does really bring it in and makes it real for the students.
Right.
So what some people don't know, you do have a history with janitors in your family.
Yeah.
So just kind of tell them a little bit about your experience with janitors.
My mom has been she was a janitor and a maid for her entire life. And we, my family, a bunch of hardworking people, right, honest to do, try to make a living people. But, we didn't grow up with the silver spoons.
Right.
It was a lot of years of struggle, and many aspects of poverty for a while. And my grandfather actually was a factory worker, where he was trying to raise 11 kids on $5,000 a year.
All right, stop right there. Say that again, because I think somebody may have missed that.
Yeah, raising 11 kids, $5,000 a year.
5,000 people.
But he was the type of person that would not let that bring him down.
Right.
My mom was born in 1947. My grandparents were born in 1914 and 1915, respectively. On the year my mom was born, they bought their first bit of land, which is his salary, right? At the time, the land was $250, and it took him 4 years to pay it off. We're talking about the 40s. And to this day, me and my sister share ownership of that land.
Wow.
But, it was a bunch of janitors, right? A bunch of, as you could say, lowly wage factory workers, if you want to call them that. And so my mom worked that type of career. When I was born, my grandfather was already retired, but he went back to working alongside my mom as a janitor to help take care of me, because my father wasn't around. And so when I actually got to college and I was just trying to pay my way through school, in essence, that was the family business.
Right.
And so my mom knew a few people at school districts around. And so she was like, why don't you just work that and pay your way? And so for almost 3 years of my college experience, I worked full time as a janitor. So it would be a situation to where I would go to classes from 8 to 2:30. And then I would go work from 3:30 to like 12 at midnight or 1, Monday through Friday, paying my way through school. And so I was doing this 1920 while everybody was out partying. Don't get me wrong. I wanted to do that too. You know what I'm saying? Right. I had to pay the school. And so it taught me a lot about organizing my time.
Yeah.
Right. And at the time, I was like, I'd never fathomed that I would go pursue a PhD, and yet alone earn it under what our school offered, the Du Bois Fellowship. And so to go from a janitor to a PhD, something I never thought would ever happen. But I appreciate those hard times, because now when I take on challenges, I was like, oh, this is nothing. I used to, clean floors and vomit off the floors and stuff like this all the time. Now you're saying that I have to just write a 20-page paper and submit it to a journal, and I may or may not get rejected. Okay, that's nothing. That's just the way I see it now, Yeah,
one definitely seems better than the other.
Yeah. And so, again, I appreciate my family for that. And although my grandparents are long gone, they taught me so much. Both of them had only an 8th grade education, but some of the smartest people, I've ever met. taught me about finances, taught me how to garden, taught me how to survive, how to take care of myself.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the things that I do now, just everyday living, was thanks to them. And so I wish they could see that. That's the only thing, but I really appreciate all the stuff that they've done. And my mom, you know how mothers always say things in certain ways to say they're proud of their children.
Yeah.
I know she's proud of me too. So, but that's sort of that part of the journey that helped me along the way as well.
Well, do you find it ironic, now that we think about the work that you do now with corporate social responsibility, especially with sports, that here you are helping others literally clean up their act?
That's great that you say that, because as I do it, as these organizations call me and say, "Hey, Professor Anderson, we like your work. We need a strategy for XYZ." Again, it takes me back to that point in time when I was that 18, 19-year-old, knowing that I was different, knowing that I was somebody that had the mindset to be a leader, right? But just didn't know the steps on how to get there at that point.
Right.
It's every time I get those calls now, to like, for example, when I got the call from PBS to help them tell the story of Jackie Robinson for their kids programs, I think about, wow, this is, I came from this.
Right.
But it seems like that was the path that was destined for me.
Yeah.
Even then, I couldn't tell, but it seems like it was very much God led. And I am very, very appreciative of that point in time, because again, I could have been doing anything else at that time, but I was getting prepared for this moment. And so to see it is still surreal when I get the calls, because I'm like, man, I didn't come from wealth. I didn't come from a platform of just having it all. So I'm appreciative of everything that comes my way now. And right, cleaning up the acts of organizations, again, I think it was something I was prepared for 20 years ago.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful what you just said, though. You really think about it. Where you sit currently in your life is this intersection of determination and destiny.
Yes.
And that's where you are right now.
Absolutely.
It was going to happen, but you had a role in ensuring that it did happen, and that was your determination. And then they met together.
Yeah.
And you are, in ways, finding yourself in situations that are mind blowing. Like, look at where I am, but ultimately, this is where I was supposed to be.
Yes. Absolutely.
Wow. So, talk a little bit about the power of communication.
So, the power of communication is very, very interesting. Because many people understand that, as you and I are communicating right now, that's very important. We're trying to get an understanding of each other. But there are also, like, for example, the nonverbals that you also pay attention to.
Yeah.
Body language, how is someone sitting, voice inflection, eyebrows being raised, right? Communication, again, sort of understands how a message is sent out, how it is received, and then the feedback you get going back. So it's a reciprocating process, right? And so where communication is very important is with what we call in the social sciences, this essence of, you can't push a business forward. You can't get a message out clear unless you're clear about your communication, right? You can have the greatest invention out there, but if you don't know how to communicate it to your public, then there you have it, right?
Right.
The any type of celebrity story, they have to understand the aspects of communication when it comes to how to spin that story. One of the biggest stories we're seeing out in the news right now is about, like, for example, Kim and Kanye.
Right.
Okay. Everybody wants to know what's going on. They may not want all of their information out right now. So they're having to figure out ways to best communicate it. And so communication is a human behavior. Okay. It is one that, if it is not used properly, it can bring about damage. So, for example, one of the studies that I and one of my colleagues are working on is this concept of identity gaps. And this is in the workplace. And so this is basically looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion through communication. And so we're saying that organizations are this one big culture, and they want the culture within and outside of that organization to be similar, okay? But they also want to bring in people from underrepresented backgrounds. And oftentimes those people have a different way of seeing life than the majority within that organization, okay? So let's say that you've been hired, you're trying to fit in, but it's hard to do so because the way they operate is different from you. That then is an identity gap, okay? And so then if you are constantly trying to negotiate that identity within the workspace, right, then you will most likely become exhausted, which would then lead to job stress, which would ultimately lead to you possibly leaving that job trying to find something else, okay? And we did this study with over 200 people who completed our questionnaire, and we found out that to be true, that most of the people from underrepresented communities in all types of jobs primarily feel the same way when they have to negotiate this identity that's different from the company. That's all about communication.
Yeah.
What is the organization communicating to you that makes you feel different? What are you communicating back that makes you feel displaced?
Wow.
And so communication then is very powerful. We think that it's something that's pretty simple, but it's very complex in many ways.
So in this area of communication specifically, or even in social responsibility, who has had a big contribution that has played a big role in your life?
I would actually say he was on my dissertation committee, and his name is he's Dean Dana Brooks, and he was the longest serving dean at West Virginia University, also a Black man. And he was like the person to know when it comes to sport and society. And he was actually the first person from the university that I talked to once I got there. And he told me that, hey, be strong. You're the Jackie Robinson of your program.
Wow.
Yeah, he told me that. And he's actually recently retired, like 2-3 years ago. But he told me I was the Jackie Robinson of my program. You know, you may face a lot of backlash for what you want to do. You know, not a lot of white people want you to be in their space.
Yeah.
It's up to you on whether or not you can handle it. But you are the Jackie Robinson of your program. And I was like, whew, those are some tough shoes to fill. But you know, I took that challenge.
Yeah.
And when I would write papers and he would take a look at them and it would be marked in red all the way through, I appreciated that as him trying to make me better.
Yeah.
And again, he was just telling me, oh, I can see you doing this, writing books and writing all these papers and speaking everywhere. And at the time, I was still scared because I'm like, oh, this is my first semester. I don't know if I can make it. But he saw that in me, even though I considered myself at the time. So he's someone that I really, really, really appreciate. And he was like the biggest proponent of my success there.
So what is one thing you wish you would have known early in your career?
One big thing as I think about it now is that no matter what ideas I have, don't sell those ideas short.
Yeah.
Because there were a lot of naysayers to my initial ideas and how I wanted to study things. The things that I wanted to do, particularly with my doctorate degree, it was met with a lot of backlash from some faculty. And for a little while, I almost gave up on it. And it delayed me a little bit. And so I wished that I had more support in that vein, if you will.
Yeah.
But I still ended up getting to what it is I wanted to do anyway.
Right.
But having a support as far as not necessarily you saying that my work is bad, I need to improve, but don't tell me that my work is stupid or my work is it doesn't make sense. It's not needed.
Yeah.
As we see now today, understanding sport and society is very much needed.
Very much so.
So that's one thing. But again, all of those issues got me here to where I am. So in hindsight, it's good.
Yeah. So when you think of social responsibility in professional sports, is there a particular area where you feel like they're really dropping the ball? No pun intended.
No. Yes. So sport organizations as a whole are very reactionary. If we take into account the Ray Rice scenario, domestic violence scenario a few years ago, not all sport leagues had like laws and ways in which they could handle situations like that until that happened.
Right.
So every other sport organization had to kind of follow suit. The whole Donald Sterling situation with the Clippers. No sport team had any type of rules or regulations set for that. And so the one thing that sport organizations have a problem with is knowing how to deal with the crises head on. They come up with excuses. They put like, for example, the NFL with the whole Colin Kaepernick thing, that has been a mess since it started 5 years ago.
Yeah.
You believe that? And now they're putting up the decals that, end racism on helmets. Okay, that's cool. That's cute.
But
you're not really addressing the issue. And,
right.
and don't get me wrong, they have the social justice initiative out there in which they donate. They designated $90 million to social causes, which is good, But we are now at an age in which athletes and other individuals who are getting instances of police brutality, brought against them are looking for policy change.
Yeah.
No, it's great to donate to nonprofits. They donate books and food and a place to live for everyone. That is very important. But now you're talking about what can we do policy-wise to stop these unarmed Black killings from happening, for example, or to stop people from getting racially profiled, or something of that magnitude.
Right.
I believe sport organizations should be profitable. They are a form of entertainment. They are. But when you say that, your intentions are always to be about community development, then that's a part of it. You can't wash that away.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one thing that these sport organizations are having problems with. One of the biggest things, I should say.
Oh man, that's a whole other conversation. We can go deeper, but we just don't have the time. Especially the Kaepernick situation. I mean, a total mess and a total miss for them, and they're still trying to get it right. So if you have somebody that's coming to you and they love the work that you're doing, what advice would you give them to pursue a career like yours?
I would say you have to learn how to take hits.
Wow.
That's the one thing that I would say, because there will be so many people that will come against you. I mean, I can even sit and think about family gatherings. And some of my wife's cousins, for example, would ask, hey, what do you do? What is your work? Well, I do corporate social responsibility in sport. I make sure sport organizations are held accountable to the communities they serve. Well, why? What is sport organizations are just a place of entertainment. Why do you want to bring them in and to help the communities? Well, because they said that that's what they want to do.
Yeah.
So you got to hold them accountable to what they're going to do. If you're talking about the Los Angeles Rams now building this stadium, which is already done, and they've played in it in Inglewood, right? And the city of Inglewood is already protesting this, saying that you're bringing in more pollution, You're taking jobs away from people, homes. What are you going to do about that? Well, that's that sport organization's responsibility because they said that they were going to do that when they came into the community. Well, I don't understand. That still doesn't make sense to me. Well, you're going to get that backlash is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so, because again, the whole stick to sports, shut up and dribble, the whole just be quiet and let it happen stuff is pretty tough out there. And so you're going to have a lot of backlash. That's the biggest thing I would say. Learn to take hits, pursue your work anyway. I promise you, if you pursue your work that you love, and that's the old cliche, you never feel like you're working. But in a sense, I'll take it a step further and say you will not feel out of purpose.
Yeah. Wow.
Because I love what I do, as you can see.
Wow. So I don't even have to ask you about staying abreast of research because you're doing the work currently. So you're always on top of this game. In order to do the work that you do, you have to stay abreast of it. So what I want to know is this: what would you say has been your biggest failure, and what did you learn from
it? Biggest failure. You should say failures. Excuse me. Taking too long to believe in myself.
Oh.
That is one of those things that I sometimes wake up and say, man, the stuff that I know now, if I would have applied it 10 years ago, look at how far I would have,
Right.
But I know to some degree, all of us think that way. But, it was a lifetime of poverty, right? Not being able to buy the Jordans when everybody else bought them, or when my mom was able to buy me Michael Jordans, it was the ones that came out before the new ones. So when I would show up to school, all the other dudes would move on. They already got the new ones, and I got the ones that was from last year. And they were like, man, what you doing? You lame, all this stuff, right? And so all of that kind of led me to this thing to like, oh, I can never, man, how can I get to this certain level in life? And so I would always hear my grandparents say, just wait. You're smart. You're going to get there. But I see what they say now at 38. But at 19, 18, I couldn't get it.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to finally be like, forget what everybody says. I'm going to pursue me, right? So that is what I say would be the biggest. And that's why I also go back to the fact of, learn how to take the hits and be cool with what you do. Because at the end of the day, you got to go home to yourself and say, oh, okay, I've done this for me. Did I do this for me, or did I do this for everybody else? That's the way I see it.
Yeah. Well, we know life is filled with ebbs and flows, highs and lows. So we talked about the failures. To this date, what would you say has been your biggest accomplishment?
I'm always a learner of life, right? And this may be an interesting one, but I say one of my biggest accomplishments was actually taking a trip to Africa. It was a few years ago. I was able to go to Accra, Ghana, witness the culture for a week. And I also was able to go to the slave castles and get the lesson on that. And when I walked through that door of no return, something just clicked in my mind. And I think it was really too at that point where it's like, I have a stronger purpose. I have a different purpose. My ancestors had to go through this, to get to this country. It's important now. It's a different mentality. Why I have to fight for this stuff now? And it changed me because I was hesitant to go because I felt I would be upset, but it actually changed my entire way of living and thinking.
Wow.
And it was one of the best things I feel like I've ever done. And also I was able to go to Du Bois's house and look at where he was buried.
Mm-hmm.
that was something surreal too.
Yeah.
All the books that they had of his lined up in this old house, I was like, it was so, I couldn't even contain it. And that was like one of the best decisions ever. And so again, I am all about the work, how important the work is, and moving forward without regrets.
So in the work that you do, how do you define success?
Success to me, don't get me wrong, if you gain a lot of material wealth from success, hey, so be it. I'm about, are you living on purpose?
Yeah.
You know, do you feel right about the work that you're doing, whether you are a janitor, whether you are a barber, whether you are a PhD? Is it true to you? That is the value of success to me. And if it's not, I wouldn't consider that a successful life.
Yeah. Wow. So how would you say that the NFL or the NBA or any of these sports organizations, how would you define or evaluate their response to Black Lives Matter movement?
That's another great question. I say the NBA is probably leading right now.
Right.
They are the most global out of all of the sports, primarily because the commissioner, I think, is a very top-down approach to how these organizations should handle it. The commissioner, although he may not get everything right, he's what we call in the sports world a players commissioner.
Yeah.
Meaning that he will sit down, he will discuss, he will try to do everything in his power to answer to accountability. It may not always be 100% correct, but he will at least give you a platform to express yourself and try to do things accordingly, right? So when the NBA played in that bubble, he was like, okay, we will only start back if you are comfortable.
Right.
And so the players made a list of demands of what they wanted the NBA to do. And so he tried to accommodate as best as he could. Because at the end of the day, they still have to be profitable. I take that away from them. The NFL, not so much. Because if you're talking about fan bases, the NBA is younger. It's more global. The ethnicities are all over the place. Europe is becoming more involved in the NBA. The NFL's fan base has always been a very older white male conservative. And so now you're talking about getting pushback for issues that don't really concern them, or they think it doesn't concern them. And so the NFL, although it has tried, it has put in racism in the end zone. It's trying to make the game a little bit more fun with celebrations and relatable. Again, the Colin Kaepernick situation really has hurt how they approach any issue dealing with Black lives. You know, even though Commissioner Goodell and Colin Kaepernick and others met in private to try to settle the issue, the fact still remains that if there is any other type of police brutality issue against a brown person, how will they respond? Will it be another situation where this guy is blacklisted, or will you actually do things to create policy change? And NASCAR, the NHL, all of these other places are more sort of white dominated anyway. Yeah. More Black people get involved. But if I'm speaking about from a pure fan's perspective, and I'm not trying to speak for everybody, but the colloquialism is that NASCAR and the NHL are too white anyway. Who cares? We just know how they'll think. And baseball as well. Even though baseball likes to say that Dominican players are Black players are one. They're the same, but it's not. But again, another story for another day. But these sports are traditionally white. And so you expect that from them. Mm-hmm. So the goal now is to diversify, grow. If you want to get involved in these social issues, then you got to be tangible. You can't just do this for lip service. That's where I see the sport landscape now. And those are the things that I want to kind of change with my work.
Well, let's pivot a little bit. Well, not really pivot. We're going to go a little deeper. So you're writing about this currently.
Yes.
You have a forthcoming book called Shut Up and Dribble, The Black Athlete Revolt in the Age of the hashtag Black Lives Matter. So talk a little bit about that.
So I wanted to look at the importance of protest and the importance of athletes using their platform for social change, okay? But I think we are at a point in time to where enough is enough. We are protesting, which is beautiful. But what are you gonna do to stop this? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
We're talking about NBA players who were in the bubble when there was another issue in Milwaukee. I'm forgetting the guy's name here, where the Milwaukee Bucks were about to sit out a few games for the bubble because of police injustice, right? And so that's great, and that's powerful. That these athletes are using their platform for social change. Now I want to be able to talk about what has been done and what should be done about policy reform,
right?
Policy change, where athletes are now testifying in court, about certain laws. We want to talk about those things because it's not just trying to look at athletes as these sort of brawn figures, right? We want to look at their intellectual capacity along with their brawn as these sort of multi-hyphenated individuals who can go out and play at the highest of athletic competition, but can also step into a courtroom and say, hey, I know about this law, we need to change this. And then my goal is to also look at what can the organizations do, the sport organizations do, okay, to support these athletes in their endeavors for social change, okay, to not just put, again, lip service on it.
Right.
But what are you going to do monetarily? What are you going to do in support in the courtrooms or support in their education if they want to become lawyers or something like that? What are you going to do to help move things to tangible change? Again, it's about not recognizing these athletes as people who should just shut up and dribble. But how can we move forward in this age of Black Lives Matter, where we are constantly and persistently pushing aspects of social change? That's what this book is all about. And I'm actually pretty excited about it. I finished my first chapter yesterday.
Okay.
So now I'm going to send it out to a few people to get feedback. So, but I'm looking forward to it. I think this is a much needed book in our time. Because if we think about it, the movement started almost a decade ago.
Yeah.
We're seeing that it's alive and well in the news media, but this is something that's been going on for a decade. So what has been going on in this time frame that is leading us to this change?
Yeah. Oh, I think it's going to be a powerful book. I can't wait to read it. So make sure you keep us posted on when it's going to drop.
Sure will.
So for all the viewers and the listeners, I want you to know these are the type of people that we have that are connected to the Black Doctoral Network. So how has your affiliation with the Black Doctoral Network enhanced your career, Dr. Anderson?
Pursuing a PhD is already tough enough, right?
Right.
It can also be a lonely space for many. And so the Black Doctoral Network, when I saw that, I was like, oh man, this is a space for us to be able to love on each other, critique, just talk without having to explain.
Right.
You may be someone who's pursuing something in biology, which is great, cool. I don't understand an area, but we are all in pursuance of something that, such as Julianne Malveaux, Dr. Cornel West, Du Bois. We see these people pursuing that. It must have been difficult. But we all are collectively now in this space to be able to love and share. And the Black Doctoral Network did that for me while I was pursuing my PhD, I would look at everybody's stories on Facebook, talking about how they're trying to get through, and that would help me a lot. And so it's still a joy to be a part of it today.
Well, we are so happy to have you. And I want to thank you again for joining us today on the Black Doctors Talk podcast. This has truly been a pleasure to have you on. And I know you have shared a lot of needed information for our viewers and our listeners. Dr. Anderson, will you please tell our viewers and listeners where they can go to learn more about you and the work you're doing?
Sure. So on Twitter, I am at Shaun Mark Speaks. Instagram and Facebook, the same, at Shaun Mark Speaks. You can also visit my website at www.shaunmarkanderson.com. That's spelled ShaunMarkanderson.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us again. Please be sure to stay connected to the Black Doctoral Network and connect with us on all of our social media channels. Thank you for joining us today for the Black Doctors Talk podcast. We hope you will join us again next time. But for now, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to tell a friend. Thanks so much.